Ethan and Lyra walked through the long metal corridors of Orion Trade Station. The station was quieter now. Most shops had closed for the night cycle, and the crowds were smaller. Only a few travelers moved through the halls, carrying cargo or heading back to their ships. Lyra stayed close to Ethan. She was not used to walking beside someone who actually cared about her safety. Every small sound made her nervous. Every shadow made her glance over her shoulder. Ethan noticed. "Relax," he said gently as they walked. "You're safe for now." Lyra looked up at him but did not say anything. After a few minutes, they reached a narrow hallway filled with small living quarters for travelers. The walls were old and scratched from years of use. Ethan stopped in front of a simple metal door and tapped a small key card on the scanner. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside was a small room. There was a single bed, a table, 2 chairs, and a small food station near the wall. It was not a fancy place, but it was clean and quiet. Lyra stepped inside slowly. Her eyes moved across the room with surprise. "This is yours?" she asked softly. "Temporary," Ethan replied, with a small smile. Travelers don't usually stay in one place too long. He walked to the food station and opened a storage container. Inside were several ration packs and a few warm meal containers. Ethan handed one to Lyra. "This one tastes better than the ration bars," he said. Lyra carefully opened it. Warm steam rose into the air. The smell alone made her stomach growl again. She sat at the table and began eating slowly. This time she tried to take smaller bites, but hunger still pushed her to eat faster. Ethan leaned back in his chair and watched quietly. After a few minutes he spoke. "So, Lyra," she looked up. "Yeah. Do you remember who attacked your world?" Lyra froze. Her hands tightened around the food container. "I don't know their name," she said quietly. "Their ships were dark and very large." "Lesto?" "They destroyed our defenses very quickly." Ethan frowned slightly. "Raiders usually don't wipe out an entire planet," he said. Lyra nodded slowly. "That's what my father said." Ethan leaned forward. "Your father?" "He was part of our science council," Lyra explained. "He said our people had something that others wanted." Ethan's curiosity grew. "What kind of something?" Lyra hesitated. "I don't really understand it," she admitted. "But our scientists could activate very old technology, machines from ancient civilizations." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That sounds important." Before Lyra could answer, a loud metallic sound suddenly echoed. From outside the hallway, clang. Ethan's head turned toward the door. Someone had hit the metal wall outside. Then came heavy footsteps. More than one person. Lyra's eyes widened with fear. "They found me," she whispered. Ethan stood up slowly. "Stay here," he said quietly. He walked toward the door and pressed a small button beside it. The screen next to the door lit up, showing the hallway camera. 3 tall figures stood outside. All of them wore dark armor and long coats. Each one carried a weapon. Bounty hunters. One of them stepped closer to the door and spoke loudly. "Human, we know you're inside." Lyra's breathing became fast. Ethan looked back at her for a moment. "Friends of yours?" he asked. Lyra shook her head quickly. "They're the ones hunting me." Outside the door, one of the hunters knocked on the metal surface with the back of his weapon. "Listen carefully, human," the hunter said. "We are here for the girl." Ethan crossed his arms. The hunter continued. "Hand her over, and we leave peacefully." Lyra slowly stood up behind Ethan. Her voice trembled. "You should let them take me," she said quietly. Ethan turned toward her. "Why would I do that?" "Because they will hurt you," Lyra said. "And you don't even know me." Ethan stared at her for a moment, then he sighed softly. "You're right," Allah lowered her head. But then Ethan continued, "I don't know you, Allah." He walked toward a small locker near the wall and opened it. Inside was a simple combat jacket and a compact plasma pistol. Ethan picked up the weapon and checked the power cell. "But I do know one thing," he said calmly. Lyra looked up again. Ethan slid the weapon into a holster on his belt. "No one gets hunted like an animal while I'm around." Outside the door, the hunters had grown impatient. One of them raised his weapon. "Last warning. Human." Ethan walked back toward the door control. He looked at Lyra one more time. "Stay behind me," he said. Then he pressed the button. The door slid open. The 3 bounty hunters immediately raised their weapons. But instead of fear, they saw the human standing calmly in the doorway. One of the hunters laughed. "You're either very brave," said, "or very stupid." Ethan gave a small smile. "Yeah," he replied. "I hear that a lot." Behind him, Lyra's heart pounded in her chest, because for the first time since her world was destroyed, someone was actually willing to fight for her. The hallway outside Ethan's room became very quiet. 3 bounty hunters stood in front of the open door, their weapons raised and ready. Their dark armor reflected the cold white lights of the station corridor. Behind Ethan, Lyra stood frozen with fear. Her heart was beating so fast that it hurt. She had seen people like these hunters before. They were the kind who traveled across the galaxy searching for targets. They did not ask questions. They only cared about the reward. And she knew one thing for certain. They would not leave without her. The tallest hunter stepped forward slowly. His armor made a heavy sound with every step. "Human," he said, in a calm but cold voice, "this does not concern you." Ethan leaned casually against the doorframe. "It kind of does," he replied. The hunter tilted his head slightly. "We are here for the girl. She belongs to someone who is willing to pay a great amount for her return." Lyra lowered her head. She knew that was true. Many powerful groups wanted control of her species' ancient knowledge. Even though she was only a child, she carried something valuable, something dangerous. The hunter continued speaking. "Hand her over, and we will leave peacefully. No one gets hurt." Ethan crossed his arms. "I'm going to say no to that." The hallway became silent again. One of the other hunters laughed quietly. "You humans really are strange," he said. "You risk your life for strangers." Ethan shrugged. Sometimes the tallest hunter's voice grew colder. "This is your final chance." Behind Ethan, Lyra slowly stepped closer. Her small voice trembled. "Please, just let them take me." Ethan glanced back at her. "They'll hurt you," she said, "and they will hurt you too." Ethan studied her face for a moment. Then he sighed. "You know something, Lyra?" She looked confused. "What? You keep saying I don't know you?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Oh, that's true." Ethan gave a small smile. "But I know enough." He turned back toward the hunters. "You're scared," he said quietly to Lyra, "and someone is trying to take advantage of that." Then he spoke something that surprised her completely. "And I don't like bullies." The hunters exchanged annoyed looks. The tallest one raised his weapon higher. "Enough talking." Ethan's hand moved quickly to the plasma pistol on his belt. In the same second, the hunter fired. A bright blue blast shot through the hallway. Ethan jumped to the side, and the energy bolt struck the metal wall behind him with a loud explosion. The fight had begun. Ethan fired back instantly. His shot struck the nearest hunter's shoulder armor, sending sparks into the air and forcing him backward. "Stay down," Ethan shouted to Lyra. Lyra quickly crouched behind the table inside the room. Her hands trembled as she covered her head. Outside, the hallway filled with flashes of bright plasma fire. The second hunter rushed forward, trying to push into the room, but Ethan kicked the door panel hard. The heavy metal door slammed partially shut, forcing the hunter to stumble backward. Ethan stepped out into the hallway now, blocking the entrance completely. The hunters realized something quickly. This human was not just a traveler. He moved too fast. His aim was too steady. The tallest hunter narrowed his eyes. "You're a soldier," he growled. Ethan fired another shot that forced the hunters to duck behind the wall. "Used to be," Ethan replied. One hunter tried to move around the corner to flank him. Ethan anticipated the move. He stepped forward and slammed his elbow into the hunter's helmet, knocking him to the ground. The corridor echoed with the sound of metal hitting the floor. The fight was becoming loud now. It's too loud. Station alarms suddenly began to flash red across the hallway. A robotic voice echoed through the corridor. "Security alert. Weapons discharge. Detected." The hunters cursed. Security drones would arrive soon. They didn't want a long battle. The tallest hunter raised his weapon again and fired several rapid shots. Ethan dodged backward into the room. One blast destroyed the small table. Another burned a deep mark into the wall. Lyra screamed softly and moved further into the corner. Ethan fired back one last time, hitting the hallway lights. The corridor suddenly went dark. In the confusion, Ethan quickly slammed the door shut and activated the manual lock. The heavy door sealed with a loud clang. Outside, the hunters pounded angrily on the metal. "Human," one of them shouted. "You cannot protect her forever." Ethan leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. Lyra slowly stood up. "I were wide with shock." "You fought them," she whispered. Ethan rubbed his shoulder where a small burn mark showed through his jacket. "Yeah," he said calmly. Lyra looked down at the destroyed table, the burned walls, and the sealed door. "They will come back," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "Probably." Lyra's voice trembled again. "Then why are you still helping me?" The Orion trade station was never quiet. Thousands of alien travelers moved through its wide metal halls every day. Bright lights flashed above crowded markets. Ships arrived and left every hour. Traders shouted prices, machines hummed, and security. Drones floated silently through the air. It was one of the busiest places in that part of the galaxy. And yet, in the middle of all that noise and movement, there was one small corner that everyone tried to ignore. Against a cold metal wall, a small alien girl sat on the floor. She was thin and weak. Her clothes were torn and dusty. Her skin had a soft silver color, and faint glowing lines ran across her arms. Her eyes, once bright and curious, now looked tired and empty. Her name was Lyra, and she was completely alone. Many aliens walked past her every minute. Some were tall with long insect legs. Others had scales, claws, or glowing eyes. The station was full of different species from hundreds of worlds. But none of them stopped. Some glanced at her for a moment, then quickly looked away. Others whispered quietly to each other. A few even stepped around her like she was nothing more than trash left on the floor. Because everyone on the station knew the story. Lyra's people were gone. Her homeworld had been destroyed months ago. Raiders had attacked her planet without warning. Cities burned. Ships crashed. Entire families disappeared in fire and smoke. No one came to help. No fleets arrived. No heroes appeared. When the attack ended, Lyra's species was almost completely wiped out, and somehow she survived. She escaped in a small, damaged shuttle and drifted through space for days before being found by traders. They brought her to Orion Station and left her there. After that, no one wanted to deal with her. Too many aliens, a lone survivor, was a problem. Some believed her species was cursed. Others feared that whoever destroyed her world might come looking for the last survivor. Helping her meant risking trouble. So most aliens chose the easiest option. They ignored her. Days passed. Lyra stayed in the same corner near an old cargo door. Sometimes she tried to ask for food. Sometimes she quietly watched people walking past. Most of the time, she said nothing at all. Hunger slowly made her weaker. Her stomach hurt. Her head felt heavy. Even standing up had become difficult. Still, no one helped. One large reptilian merchant walked past her and muttered, "Pathetic creature." Another alien trader laughed softly. "Why keep living when your entire species is gone?" Lyra heard those words. She lowered her head and hugged her knees tightly. She tried not to cry. Across the station, floating security drones noticed her many times. Their sensors scanned her small body, but she wasn't breaking any rules. She was simply existing. So they moved on. Hours passed. The bright station lights slowly dimmed as the artificial night cycle began. The crowds became smaller. Shops closed. The loud noises of the station faded into a quiet mechanical hum. Lyra's eyes slowly closed. She was tired. Maybe tomorrow she would find food. Maybe someone would help her. But deep down, she didn't believe that anymore. Because the truth was simple. The galaxy had already forgotten her. Footsteps echoed through the quiet hallway. Heavy, steady footsteps. Someone was walking toward her corner. Lyra didn't bother. Looking up at first, many aliens passed through this hallway. None of them ever stopped. But this time, the footsteps slowed down. Then they stopped completely. Lyra slowly lifted her head. Standing in front of her was a tall figure. Not scaled, not covered in fur, not glowing or armored. Just a tall being wearing a simple dark jacket and travel boots. A human. Humans were still new to the galaxy. Many species didn't fully understand them yet. The human looked down at the small alien girl sitting on the floor. For a long moment, he said nothing. Lyra expected the same thing that always happened. The human would stare for a moment, then walk away. Just like everyone else. But he didn't move. Instead, he slowly crouched down so he was closer to her height. His voice was calm and gentle. "Hey," he said softly. Lyra blinked in surprise. No one had spoken to her kindly in a very long time. The human looked at her thin arms and tired eyes. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a small food pack. He held it out toward her. "You look hungry," he said. Lyra stared at the food. Her hands trembled slightly. "Why?" she whispered weakly. The human tilted his head. "Why, what?" Lyra's voice was barely louder than the hum of the station. "Why are you helping me?" The human gave a small, simple smile. "Because you look like someone who needs help." Around them, a few late travelers stopped walking. They watched the strange scene quietly. An abandoned alien girl and a human who refused to walk away. None of them realized it yet, but that small moment was about to change both of their lives forever. Lyra stared at the small food pack in the human's hand. For a long moment, she did not move. Her mind was full of doubt. Many people had looked at her before, but none had ever tried to help. She had learned that hope could hurt more than hunger. The human waited patiently. He did not push the food closer. He did not rush her. He simply held it out and let her decide. Around them, a few late travelers had slowed their steps. Some aliens stood near the corridor walls, quietly watching the strange moment. A human helping the last survivor of a destroyed species was not something people saw every day. Finally, Lyra slowly reached out. Her thin fingers touched the food pack carefully, as if it might disappear. When nothing bad happened, she gently took it from his hand. The human smiled a little. "Go ahead," he said softly. "It's safe." Lyra opened the pack with shaking hands. Inside was a simple ration bar, the kind travelers carried for long journeys. To most people, it was nothing special. To Lyra, it felt like a treasure. She took a small bite first, then another. Within seconds, hunger took control, and she began eating quickly. The human stayed quiet while she finished. He did not stare or ask questions. He just waited until she was done. When Lyra finally looked up again, her eyes were slightly brighter. "Thank you," she said quietly. The human nodded. "You're welcome." He sat down on the metal floor across from her, resting his back against the wall. "My name is Ethan," he said. Lyra hesitated before answering. "Lyra?" Ethan nodded again, like the name was important. "Well, Lyra, what are you doing?" "Out here alone." Lyra looked down at her hands. For a moment, she did not speak. Then the words slowly came out. "My home is gone." Ethan's expression changed slightly, but he did not interrupt. "Raiders attacked our planet," Lyra continued quietly. "They burned everything. Cities, families, ships." Her voice trembled. "I escaped in a small shuttle. I drifted through space for days." Ethan listened carefully. "A trader ship found me," she said. "They brought me here." Lyra looked around the empty hallway, and then they left. Silence filled the corridor. Even the nearby aliens listening from a distance became quiet. Everyone knew about destroyed worlds. The galaxy was not always peaceful. But hearing the story from the last survivor felt different. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck slowly. "That's rough," he said. Lyra nodded. "No one wants to help me," she added softly. "They say my people are cursed." From the corner of the hallway, a tall insect-like alien suddenly spoke. "They are not wrong, human." Ethan looked up. The alien stepped closer. His long legs clicked against the metal floor. "You should stay away from that girl," the alien said. Calmly, "Her species brings trouble." Several other aliens nearby nodded quietly. Ethan looked back at Lyra. She had lowered her head again. It was clear she had heard these words many times before. Ethan stood up slowly. Then he looked directly at the insect alien. "Trouble," Ethan said. "Yes," the alien replied. "The ones who destroyed her world may still be searching for survivors." Ethan crossed his arms. "So your solution is to leave a kid starving in a hallway?" The alien did not respond. Ethan shook his head. "Yeah, that sounds about right." He turned back to Lyra. "Hey," he said gently. She slowly looked up. "Do you have anywhere to go tonight?" Lyra shook her head. Ethan sighed quietly. "Well, that's a problem." He looked down the hallway, thinking. Orion Station was not a safe place for someone like her. There were too many criminals, too many hunters, and too many people who didn't care. Then Ethan made a decision. A simple one, but one that would soon cause a lot of trouble. He held out his hand toward her. "Come on," he said. Lyra stared at his hand in confusion. "Where?" she asked. Ethan smiled slightly. "I rented a small room on the station," he explained. "Nothing fancy, but it has a bed and food." Lyra looked shocked. "You want me to come with you?" Ethan shrugged. "Less you prefer sleeping in this hallway." The nearby aliens began whispering again. Helping her with food was one thing. Taking responsibility for her was something completely different. Lyra looked at Ethan's hand for a long time. Finally, very slowly, she reached out. Her small hand gently touched his. Ethan helped her stand up. She was lighter than he expected, much lighter. "All right," Ethan said. "First mission, get you some real food." Lyra gave a tiny smile, the first one she had shown since arriving at the station. But across the large hallway, someone else had been watching the entire scene. 3 tall figures stood near the shadow of a cargo elevator. They wore dark armor and long cloaks. Bounty hunters. One of them tapped a small device on his wrist. The screen showed Lyra's face. The hunter smiled coldly. "Well," he said quietly. The room slowly became quiet again. The red emergency lights outside the hallway faded, and the station alarms stopped repeating their warning message. Somewhere in the distance, security drones were searching for the source of the earlier fight. Inside the small room, Ethan sat in the chair near the wall, breathing slowly. Lyra sat on the floor across from him, holding the ration pack he had given her. She had not opened it yet. Her eyes kept moving toward the door. "They will come back," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, bounty hunters don't give up easily." He leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. "But that's not what worries me." Lyra looked confused. "What do you mean?" Ethan studied her face for a moment before speaking. 3 bounty hunters chasing 1 kid across the galaxy. He said, "That kind of effort means someone important is paying." Then Lyra looked down at her hands. "I told you, they want the knowledge my people had." Ethan shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "They want something more than knowledge." Lyra's glowing lines on her arms flickered faintly. Ethan noticed. "Lyra, what exactly did your father work on?" Lyra stayed silent. For a moment, it seemed like she might refuse to answer. Then she stood up slowly and walked toward the small window on the wall. The window showed a view of space outside the station. Hundreds of ships floated quietly in the darkness. "My father studied ancient technology," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "You mentioned that before." Lyra placed her hand on the cold glass, "But our people did not just study it." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "We could activate it." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Activate ancient alien machines," he repeated. Lyra nodded slowly. "Long ago, powerful civilizations built massive machines across the galaxy. No one fully understands how they work." Ethan crossed his arms. "I've heard the stories." Lyra turned toward him again. "My people had a special ability. Our minds could connect with those machines." Ethan stared at her. "You're serious?" "Yes." Lyra lifted her arm slightly. The glowing lines on her skin became brighter for a moment. "This is part of it." Ethan suddenly understood something important. "That's why your planet was attacked." Lyra nodded. "Someone wanted to control our ability." Ethan stood up slowly. "Let me guess," he said. "Your species refused to help them." Lyra's expression became sad. "My father said some powers in the galaxy believe ancient technology can control entire star systems." Ethan walked closer to the window. "So someone destroyed your world to capture that power?" "Yes." The room became quiet again. Ethan rubbed his chin as he thought. "So if you're the last survivor," Lyra finished the sentence, "then I am the last person who can activate those machines." Ethan whistled quietly. "Well," he said, "that explains the bounty hunters." Lyra lowered her head. "That is why you should not protect me," she said softly. "Anyone who stays near me becomes a target." Ethan looked at her carefully. "You're right about one thing." Lyra looked up, expecting him to agree with her, but Ethan surprised her again. "You are definitely a target." Lyra's shoulders dropped. "But that doesn't mean I'm leaving you alone." Lyra blinked in confusion. "You still want to help me?" Ethan shrugged. "Too late now." Lyra frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Ethan pointed toward the door. "Those hunters already saw my face." Lyra slowly understood. "If they report back, Ethan nodded. Then whoever hired them already knows there's a human involved. Lyra's eyes widened. I caused you trouble. Ethan laughed quietly. Kid, trouble and I are old friends. Before Lyra could respond, Ethan's small wrist communicator suddenly beeped. He looked down at the screen. Ah, message from station security. Ethan opened it. His relaxed expression disappeared immediately. Lyra noticed a change. What is it? Ethan showed her the screen. A security alert had been sent across the station network. Wanted unknown ICT target. Unknown alien survivor reward. Extremely high status. Capture alive. Below the message was a small image. Lyra's face. Lyra gasped softly. They posted a bounty. Ethan nodded, and not a small one. Lyra felt her legs grow weak. That means hunters from everywhere will come. Ethan looked out the window again. Ships were already moving through the darkness. Some arriving, some leaving. He had a bad feeling. Yeah, he said quietly. Word travels fast in places like this. Lyra's voice became very small. There will be too many enemies. Ethan remained silent for a moment. Then he grabbed his jacket from the chair. Well, T said calmly. I guess we can't stay here anymore. Lyra looked confused. What do you mean? Ethan walked toward the door and began packing his gear. If every hunter in the station is about to start looking for you. He checked the charge on his plasma pistol again. Then this place is about to become very dangerous. Lyra's heart started racing again. Where will we go? Ethan opened the door control panel and prepared to unlock it. He gave her a small, confident smile. Somewhere they won't expect. Lyra took a deep breath. For the first time since leaving her destroyed world. She had someone standing beside her. But the entire galaxy was now searching for her. And soon, much stronger enemies would arrive. The door to Ethan's small room slid open slowly. The hallway outside was quiet again, but the silence did not feel safe anymore. Dim yellow lights flickered along the metal walls, and the distant sound of station engines echoed through the corridors. Ethan stepped out first, scanning both directions carefully. Lyra stayed close behind him. Her eyes moved nervously from shadow to shadow. Are they gone? She whispered. Ethan shook his head. No, he said quietly. They're just waiting. Lyra felt a chill run through her body. The bounty message had already spread across the station network. Every hunter, smuggler, and mercenary on Orion Station now knew her face. And the reward was high, very high. Anyone could try. To capture her, Ethan began walking quickly down the corridor. Stay close, he said. Lyra followed without asking questions. They passed through several narrow hallways and small cargo sections. Most travelers ignored them, but a few people stared a little longer than normal. Some eyes looked curious, others looked greedy. Lyra noticed they know. She said softly, Ethan nodded. Some of them do. They turned a corner and entered a larger hallway filled with cargo crates and transport machines. At the far end of the corridor, a group of rough-looking aliens stood near a loading elevator. They were not wearing station uniforms, and they were all staring directly at Lyra. One of them slowly smiled. Well, the alien said. His voice was low and rough. Looks like the bounty is walking toward us. Lyra froze. Ethan did not stop walking. Instead, he stepped slightly in front of her. The alien group began moving closer. There were 5 of them. Too many for a quiet fight. Ethan leaned closer to Lyra and whispered, When I say run, you run. Lyra's heart pounded, but just trust me. The aliens were now only a few meters away. The leader of the group cracked his knuckles. That little girl is worth a fortune, he said, and we found her first. Ethan gave a small smile. Congratulations. The alien frowned. Ethan suddenly reached into his jacket and threw a small metal device onto the floor. Flash! A blinding white light exploded across the hallway. The aliens shouted in pain as their vision disappeared. "Run!" Ethan shouted. Lyra ran. She sprinted down the hallway as fast as she could. Behind her, she heard shouting footsteps and the sound of a short fight. Ethan quickly caught up to her. They rushed into a nearby service tunnel and slammed the emergency door shut behind them. Both of them leaned against the wall. Breathing hard, Lyra looked up at him with wide eyes. "You planned that?" Ethan shrugged. "I've been in worse situations." Lyra tried to slow her breathing. "But how do we escape the station?" Ethan looked down the dark service tunnel. "There's only one way." They began moving again. This time through the maintenance corridors used by engineers and repair drones. The tunnels were darker and much quieter. After several minutes of walking, they reached a large maintenance window. Outside the glass, rows of ships floated in the massive hangar bay of Orion Station. Ethan pointed toward a medium-sized cargo ship. "That one." Lyra looked confused. "Is that your ship?" Ethan shook his head. "No." Lyra blinked. "Then how we're borrowing it?" Lyra stared at him in disbelief. "You're stealing a ship." Ethan thought for a moment. "Temporarily relocating." Lyra almost laughed. But before she could say anything, a deep mechanical voice echoed through the station. Security announcement. Multiple bounty hunters detected in docking sectors. Station lockdown will begin in 10 minutes. Ethan's expression became serious. "Great," he muttered. Lyra's stomach tightened. "What happens when the station locks down?" "No ships leave," Ethan said. Lyra looked at the cargo ship again. "That means we're trapped." Ethan shook his head. "Only if we're still here when the doors close." Lyra suddenly heard something behind them. Footsteps, heavy ones. Ethan heard them too. He slowly turned around at the far end of the tunnel. 3 large figures stepped into the dim light. They wore dark combat armor, but these were not ordinary bounty hunters. Their armor carried the symbol of a powerful mercenary guild. The leader stepped forward and spoke calmly. "You've caused quite a mess, human." Lyra felt fear rise in her chest again. Ethan placed his hand on his weapon. "Yeah," he said. "I have that effect on people." The mercenary leader looked directly at Lyra. "Our employer wants the girl alive." Then he looked back at Ethan. "But you." The mercenary slowly lifted his weapon. "You are no longer needed." Lyra felt her hands shaking. There were 2. Many enemies now. Too many hunters. The entire station was turning against them. The narrow maintenance tunnel was filled with silence. On one side stood Ethan and Lyra. On the other side stood 3 heavily armed mercenaries in dark combat armor. Their leader held a large plasma rifle, its blue energy core glowing brightly. In the dim light, behind Ethan, the massive hangar bay could be seen through the maintenance window. Hundreds of ships floated quietly in the docking area. Freedom was so close, but 3 mercenaries were blocking the only path. The leader of the group took a slow step forward. "Human," he said calmly, "step aside." Ethan did not move. "You know you cannot win this fight," the mercenary continued. "Our employer only wants the girl." Lyra's heart felt like it might explode in her chest. She stepped slightly forward. "Ethan, maybe you should know," Ethan said quietly. Lyra stopped speaking. The mercenary leader sighed. "Humans," he muttered. "Always emotional, always protecting things that are not theirs." Ethan gave a small smile. "Yeah," he said. "That's kind of our thing." The mercenary lifted his weapon and pointed it directly at Ethan's chest. "This is your last chance." Ethan slowly placed his hand on his plasma pistol. Behind him, Lyra whispered softly. "There are too many of them." Ethan nodded slightly. Yeah, I noticed. The mercenary's voice became cold. Then why are you still standing there? Ethan thought for a moment. Then he answered. Honestly, because she needs someone to stand here. For a second, no one moved. Then everything exploded into action. The mercenary fired first. A bright blue energy blast shot down the tunnel. Ethan dove to the side and fired back immediately. The tunnel filled with flashes of plasma fire. Sparks flew from the metal walls. As shots struck pipes and panels, one mercenary rushed forward with a shock blade. Ethan kicked a loose toolbox toward him, slowing him down just enough to dodge the attack. But the fight was still unfair. 3 trained fighters against 1 tired human. One blast struck the wall beside Ethan, throwing him backward. He crashed against the floor hard. Lyra gasped. Ethan! The mercenary leader stepped closer, aiming his weapon again. It's over, human. Ethan tried to stand, but pain shot through his shoulder. For the first time, Lyra felt completely helpless again, just like when her world burned. Just like when everyone abandoned her, the mercenary turned toward her. Come with us, girl, he said. Q. We'll have to get hurt. Lyra's glowing lines began to flicker across her arms. Her breathing became faster. Something inside her mind felt strange, like a quiet voice waking up. Behind the mercenaries, inside the giant hangar bay, an old cargo ship suddenly made a low humming sound. No one noticed at first. Lyra felt it. Her eyes widened. The ancient connection her father once spoke about. It was real. The ship's systems responded to her presence. Machines inside the vessel slowly began activating. Ethan saw the change in her expression. Lyra, he asked. Her glowing lines shined brighter now, I think. I can control it, she whispered. The mercenary leader turned in confusion. What are you talking about? Suddenly, the cargo ship's engines roared to life. Bright lights flashed across the hangar bay. Emergency alarms echoed throughout the station. The mercenaries looked back toward the window in shock. The massive ship was powering up by itself. Ethan slowly smiled. Well, he said, that's convenient. The mercenaries quickly realized the danger. Stop her, one of them shouted. But it was too late. Lyra lifted her hand slightly. Across the hangar bay, the cargo ship's docking clamps exploded open. The ship floated free. A powerful engine blast shattered part of the docking barrier. The shockwave shook the entire maintenance tunnel. The mercenaries lost their balance for a moment. Ethan took the opportunity. He jumped forward and knocked the nearest mercenary to the ground. The second one tried to fire, but Ethan slammed his weapon aside. The third mercenary hesitated, just long enough. Ethan fired one final plasma shot that forced them all back. Lyra, he shouted. Now, the cargo ship outside the window moved closer to the hangar exit. Station alarms screamed across every corridor. Lyra grabbed Ethan's arm. Come. On, they ran down the emergency stairs toward the hangar floor. Behind them, security drones and mercenaries rushed into the tunnel too late. Within seconds, Ethan and Lyra reached the open cargo ramp of the ship. They jumped inside. The ramp sealed shut. Inside the cockpit, the ship's control panels glowed with life. Lyra placed her hand gently on the control console. The ship responded. Instantly, the engines roared louder. Outside, Orion's station grew smaller as the ship blasted into open space. For the first time in months, Lyra was no longer being hunted inside a cage. She looked at Ethan, who was leaning back in the pilot's seat, exhausted but smiling. You protected me, she said quietly. Ethan shrugged. Someone had to. Lyra looked out at the endless stars ahead. The galaxy was still dangerous. Many enemies would still search for her. But she was not alone anymore. And across the universe, a new story would soon spread. A story about a human who stood against the galaxy, just to protect one small girl.